Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the escalating global tug of war between short-term political goals and long-term economic stability. It's a battle that directly impacts the value of the money in your wallet, and right now, the tension is honestly higher than it's been in decades. What we're looking at is a fundamental clash, central bank independence on one side and the looming threat of fiscal dominance on the other.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the political pressure cooker, define central bank independence, explore the fiscal dominance threat, look at the crossroads at the Fed, examine global strategies, and end with why the true currency is trust.
Section 1. The political pressure cooker. Unprecedented friction at the Federal Reserve.
We're starting with some incredibly high drama at the U.S. Central Bank, where the political temperature has literally reached a boiling point. Executive branch frustration has built up to a truly rare sequence of events. Based on reports from Michigan State University experts, back in July 2025, word got out about a drafted letter to dismiss current Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Then, by February 2026, the Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Powell. And now, looking at May 2026, Kevin Warsh has been nominated to replace him. You have to understand, a criminal investigation of a sitting Fed chair is entirely unique in modern American history. It places the institution squarely and uncomfortably in the political spotlight. Section 2. Defining central bank independence. A century of tension. To really get why this transition matters so much, we need to step back. Why are central banks insulated from politicians in the first place? Well, as ECB President Christine Lagarde recently highlighted in a speech, even Napoleon Bonaparte wrestled with this back in 1806. Governments naturally want control over the money supply. But history proves time and time again that giving politicians too much control over the printing press consistently leads to disaster, usually in the form of runaway inflation. So there's a huge difference between what's written on paper and actual lived reality. Formal or de jure independence is all about the rules, statutory mandates, legal protections, and fixed terms like the 14-year terms at the Fed. But what truly matters is actual or de facto independence. That's the practical ability of central bankers to stand their ground when politicians are practically demanding cheaper credit to boost the economy right before an election. Because if a central bank caves to that pressure, the public instantly expects inflation, and the bank's credibility is just ruined.
Section 3. The fiscal dominance threat. When massive debt dictates policy. Now we need to introduce the real, invisible force that's straining this independence all over the world. Wrap your head around this staggering number, 235%. According to IMF data analyzed by the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, total global public and private debt is sitting at 235% of world GDP. We haven't seen anything like this since the post-World War II era, and this massive pile of debt is fundamentally changing the rules of the game.
Which brings us straight to the concept of fiscal dominance. Think of it like this. It's a scenario where a government's massive deficits and borrowing needs basically just override whatever the central bank wants to do with monetary policy. The central bank is essentially forced to keep interest rates artificially low or even print money just to keep the heavily indebted government afloat. And when that happens, the central bank has to effectively abandon its main job of fighting inflation. Economists actually call this unpleasant monetarist arithmetic. I know it sounds super academic, but the reality is stark. In modern high-debt environments, especially during crises, governments issue so much debt and move so aggressively that they essentially back the central bank into a corner. They force it into a passive, accommodating role. Under the fiscal theory of the price level, inflation stops being just a monetary issue and basically becomes a fiscal phenomenon driven entirely by government debt.
Section 4. Crossroads at the Fed. The transition to Kevin Warsh.
Let's bring this back to the U.S. and look at how this is playing out with the incoming Fed chair, Kevin Warsh. A recent 2026 Brookings Institution survey compared expert consensus against Warsh's stated views, and the results are pretty telling. When you ask Fed watchers to grade the current regime's communication, you see a real gap. The academic and think tank crowd is handing out an impressive median grade of A-. But the private sector, the people actually moving money in the markets, they're a bit more cautious, giving it a solid B. They find the Fed's explanations of its reaction function, meaning how it actually plans to respond to changing economic data, a little less clear than the academics do.
And this data points to a potential culture clash brewing. A massive 83% of surveyed Fed watchers absolutely want to keep the chair's post-meeting press conferences. To them, it's the most useful form of communication. But incoming Chair Warsh, He's publicly expressed skepticism about the value of these frequent pressers, suggesting he prefers substance over frequency.
We're seeing the exact same disconnect when it comes to the Fed's massive balance sheet, which, remember, ballooned during the pandemic. Warsh has made it clear he wants to scale back the Fed's portfolio of government debt. Yet, 77% of surveyed experts believe the current balance sheet size doesn't pose a risk to the U.S. economy's financial stability at all. Only 6% view it as a large problem. So, the new leadership is stepping into an environment where what they want to do contrasts sharply with the current consensus.
Now, to add a little nuance to this, the Levy Economics Institute argues that full, pristine central bank independence in the U.S. is actually an illusion anyway. Why? Because the Fed was quite literally created as a creature of Congress to act as the government's banker. Operationally, it is deeply intertwined with the Treasury. According to this view, when national debt is as high as it is right now, tight coordination between the fiscal side and the monetary side isn't just likely, it's structurally inevitable.
Section 5. Global Strategies. The front lines in Europe and India.
This tension isn't just an American drama. Let's zoom out a bit. Other major central banks are defending their credibility against these exact same global pressures, but they're using different strategies. The European Central Bank, or ECB, manages highly diverse sovereign states by being absolutely strict on their primary mandate of price stability, successfully using unconventional tools to prevent the bond markets of weaker European nations from fragmenting. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, plays it a bit differently. They balance inflation targeting with occasional fiscal support by leveraging India's robust 6.6% economic growth. That strong growth acts like a shock absorber, allowing them to handle domestic debt without giving up on inflation targets.
In fact, ECB President Christine Lagarde recently laid out a highly practical playbook for surviving this high-debt era. It boils down to 3 clear conditions. First, maintain absolute clarity of the mandate. Price stability comes first, no matter what. Second, communicate directly and consistently with citizens to keep their expectations anchored. And third, central banks have to demand that governments maintain fiscal responsibility. Because realistically, a central bank just cannot maintain its independence if the government's debt trajectory becomes totally unsustainable.
Section 6. The true currency is trust. Legal independence is useless without public credibility.
Because at the end of the day, legal frameworks, statutes, and 14-year terms can't protect a central bank if the public and the markets stop believing in it. As Lagarde noted, it takes time to build trust, but only an instant to lose it. We've seen it historically, from post-World War I hyperinflation to the 2022 UK mini-budget crisis, where a sudden, unfunded government spending plan caused market credibility to crack instantly. When that trust shatters, inflation expectations violently unanchor, and the central bank is forced into full emergency mode.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely critical thought to ponder. As political transitions heat up and massive global debt collides with the need for price stability, if push comes to shove between funding a heavily indebted government and fighting inflation, who really controls the value of your money? It's a question that is going to define the global economy for the next decade. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep an eye on those debt levels, and we'll see you next time.